All right, welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Demons. That's right, folks. That is the City of Angels or La La Land, whatever you want to call it, Los Angeles. And we are broadcasting internationally. We have a very, very special guest today. We're going to touch on a lot of topics. Many of you do know who he is. It took us a while to nail him down, but we did. The one and only Mr. Wilbur Allen. Wilbur, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dr. J.
Let's go back to when you were 5 years old, because that's usually what happens to all of us. Something happened that made us dive into the subject of UFOs, UAPs, whatever they're called now.
I was living with my parents on a U.S. military base called Sculthorpe, which is based basically in England. And I woke up one night with a group of small humanoid extraterrestrials. They were the size of children. They were wearing silver spacesuits. They came into my room, and they immediately approached me, and they implanted me with something which caused me to vomit nightly for about 7 years because my body was trying to reject whatever they put inside me. And when the vomiting stopped, objects started coming out of the sky and landing in front of me, and it required that I start carrying a major camera with me to record the events because nobody would believe what I was saying was happening to me while I was out and about on the streets.
Now, can you describe the type of craft? Are they typical discs? I mean, because I do know from several witnesses they come in several types and shapes and sizes too.
I have been documenting these anomalous spacecraft, which were initially documented by Grumman, 308-1960. In 1960, during Project Echo, which is a NASA satellite, which basically was a giant reflective balloon, they launched this giant reflective balloon into orbit, and they noticed that there was several anomalous objects following it. And the anomalous objects they described resembled red streaks of light in the sky, which stretched from one state to another. Essentially, what they were talking about was massive spaceships.
Wow.
That were essentially 5 to 10, maybe 20 miles long while in space. And the samples of ships that I'm getting currently, where I am here in Haymarket, Virginia, show these anomalous spacecraft, which meet the definitions associated to the objects documented by Grumman, 308-1960. And what makes this extremely interesting is the fact that I'm getting these objects in a fixed region of space, meaning every night when I set up my camera technology, I set it up exactly the same. It's set up exactly the same as it was when I was doing research in Washington, D.C., 4 blocks from the White House. So my camera's aligned north, south, east, and west, exactly the same as it was in Washington, where I am here in Virginia. And I'm getting the same objects along the same trajectory as I was getting in Washington, D.C., in the area that I am right now in Virginia. So I know for a fact, just based on camera alignment, that there is possibly a pathway in which these objects are using to go to and from specific areas that they're interested in, especially in Washington, D.C. area.
Let me ask you this. Most people should know that you absolutely did work for ABC News in the White House as an engineer and also on Air Force One. You had access to the president, I presume, if you're on Air Force One, right?
Yes, I did.
Which presidents? Can you talk about that?
I worked with Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush was became president after vice president with Ronald Reagan, but he was also head of the Central Intelligence Agency.
That's right, the CIA. And we do know Ronald Reagan had, I believe, at least 2 sightings. One of them when he was governor of California, and he asked the pilot when he was flying to chase the object, and obviously the object just vanished, or not vanished, just took off.
Left them in the dust.
Yeah, pretty
Left them in
much.
the dust. Left
Yeah.
them in the dust. Left them in the dust.
So you are at least with presidents that were open about this topic.
Ronald Reagan, especially, he initially had put on the table the Star Wars initiative, which was taken off the table by the Democrats. But there was issues associated to what the potentials associated with the Star Wars initiative was to bring to the public, and they didn't really believe that there would be an extraterrestrial threat because even today with the amount of data that I'm able to gather on a nightly basis, and it's interesting that on a nightly basis I get the same things nightly. It says that the frequency of events indicates that these objects are based here in a sense that if I get the same objects along the same trajectory nightly and I'm getting them going and coming from the same directions, it must indicate that they've established some kind of stronghold consistent with having a base or some kind of cloaked mothership or something of that nature in the area in which I'm doing my research. And the files show without a doubt objects which appear into the airspace. They don't fly into the airspace. They appear into it. And then they go forward. So it's an absolutely different perspective on what people would think a UFO would be doing when it appears in their airspace. These objects I'm getting are materializing into the airspace. They're not flying into it, they're materializing into it. That's a big difference. That means they're using some kind of spatial portal technology. Quantum teleportation, large-scale transporting of objects from one region of space to another, and they're using that to get into our airspace.
That's actually exactly what I was going to say. They are creating wormholes. That's the fastest way for them to get.
Self-generated. NASA's study indicated that these wormholes were present along the equator, which is the equatorial line, a Bermuda Triangle, and the Alaska Triangle, while my data suggests that these spatial portals that these extraterrestrials are using exist anywhere at any given time. Not the Bermuda Triangle and the Alaska Triangle.
Are you involved with the Stars Academy?
Actually, no. They're most of those people and the crew and most of the members of the Nimitz are on my Facebook page, but nobody has reached out to me. The samples that the Navy has generated have substantiated the data that I'm generated nightly. What the Navy encountered, the Tic Tac anomalies, they are here. They are now in our airspace. They're here as I would say they've established their stronghold in such a manner that they're here permanently. They're a fixture in our airspace.
There is a question already for you. This is from Lars Saturn. In your opinion, what does the 1,000 points of light mean?
It could mean, and the term itself, 1,000 points of light, meaning light going in multiple directions in thousands of ways. It means a variation of thought, perhaps, a variation of multiple possibilities into a theme which is associated to a concept like an advanced culture or an advanced being, an extraterrestrial, could be an advanced segment of light, form of light for people who seek spiritual enlightenment. I mean, there's so many possibilities for that statement that I possibly couldn't answer the actual truthfulness associated to what it means. I couldn't answer that.
Now, let's fast forward to, because you had a quality camera, how many objects would you say you have photographed or videotaped?
I started doing research in 2010. Actually, I take that back. I started doing research in 2002 when I had a close encounter July 16th at the U.S. Capitol building with 3 other people. It just so happens the close encounter I had July 16, 2002 happened again earlier, July 15, 1952, 50 years earlier at the exact same spot, except in my close encounter, the objects were landing on the Capitol building, and I've got samples of objects which landed on a roof. One landed in the rear of the reflection pool park, and two spheres, large spheres, landed in Taft Park, and in the area where they landed in Taft Park today, which I'm talking about an event that happened in 2002, and it's 2019. Today, nothing still grows there.
You know what blows my mind is mainstream media definitely did not cover the 2002 objects at the Pentagon.
At all. I
Capitol.
took that story to my friend who was the bureau agency chief of ABC News, and they scoffed at it. In fact, what was interesting, one of the reasons why I had to do this assignment at the U.S. Capitol building was I had a supervisor that claimed to have seen extraterrestrials during a press conference around John Glenn, which was then a senator at the time. And in the process of seeing these extraterrestrials around John Glenn, my friend just happens to go insane. And he expired from the fear associated to what he had encountered as a ABC engineer while covering John Glenn. So I know for a fact that the U.S. Capitol building is indeed a possible infiltration point for extraterrestrials based on the data that I was gathering in 2002. It showed objects clearly landed on the House-Senate side. And if they landed on the House-Senate side, that means they penetrated the building.
I wonder if, because there was the citizen hearing on UFOs on disclosure in 2013 where we had 4 retired congressmen and women and 1 retired senator. But we now know that there was a real congressional investigation that began, I don't know what year, but do you think that's what sparked it?
I am not sure because there was a series of events in 2002 that were just too bizarre with the event that I documented at the U.S. Capitol building. One of them was several weeks after I had my close encounter at the Capitol building. On the south side of the reflection pool, they found 48 dead ducks and 47 dead squirrels. I mean, squirrels in the trees, on the grounds, and dead ducks in the reflection pool. And in the sample that I have from 2002, taken during the close encounter at the U.S. Capitol building, in the reflection pool was a large organism-like anomaly which glowed. It looked like a giant amoeba, and it was swimming in the reflection pool, discharging smaller objects into the water. And the camera documented that, and that just happens to be the area in which the ducks and squirrels all died at the U.S. Capitol building. They cleaned the reflection pool out from that event, by the way.
I would think so, because if tourists or anybody who's there regularly sees them, is going to wonder what the heck's going on.
Yes, and they saw that, and it was reported in the news. It was absolutely abstract because they had to send specialists in hazmat suits, which looked like astronauts, to do the research in the reflection pool. And I believe that the reflection pool was used as a staging ground by whatever this luminous object, which looked like a giant amoeba that was 6 foot long, discharging smaller green spheres into the water. It looked like it was hatching them.
Almost as if it was like alive?
Yes.
Here is another question for you. This is from Rolf Pfeiffer Muller. What's the Alaskan body snatchers missing in Alaska?
We did some research around Mount Hayes, Alaska. And in Mount Hayes, Alaska, the area itself is anomalous. In fact, in the early 1950s, both U.S. and Russian satellites, when they would pass over that area, would go dead and then reinitialize once they left the area. And in the area in which we did research, which was Mount Hayes, Alaska, we found, and I documented, the same events that I'm getting here in Virginia and the same events that I'm getting in Washington, D.C., of objects which materialized into the airspace and then dematerialized as they passed over Mount Hayes. So essentially what we were able to conclude was Mount Hayes itself is the possible location of an underground extraterrestrial base, which is based in the Arctic Circle.
Now, because I know you said you were starting researching this after the 2002 event, so 50 years later, you knew of Roger Leir, right? The implant doctor.
Of course, Roger was one of the doctors that did some medical research on me. He wanted to remove my implant, which was not going to happen because I believe that they put it in me for a reason and my body's acclimated to it for a reason. And that now, for the sake of having whatever it is in me, it allows me the opportunity to technically communicate with whatever these objects are that I'm photographing on a nightly basis. I can say to myself, okay, appear. And the minute I say that, the object will appear on my monitor as it would if it was on a demand. You know, I would demand it to appear, and it appears.
You know, when I first heard about alien implants, I thought they were just tracking devices, but it wasn't until recently, and he was a good friend of mine because he lived really close to me, and I was present during the last surgery he did in the 17th one. I fully believe that these implants do far more than tracking. They could see what you are seeing. They could
Yes.
probably even put thoughts into your head. And
Yes, they do.
now, have you actually seen somebody's implant being removed? Have you seen the analysis of it?
No, I did not. But Dr. Lear did mention that when he did do research with mine, and they know specifically where mine is, that when they tried to approach it, it moved by itself.
That's right.
And
That's exactly what happened in the 17th one.
Excruciatingly painful. It was going to kill me if they removed it.
Can you talk about where in your body it is?
It's in my head. It's right behind my ear.
Ooh, yeah, absolutely. How can you remove that? See, what I caught from Roger Lear was that the ones that were removed were the ones that were placed in the 50s or 60s, things that were like in a leg or something like that, in an arm. But then once they figured out that we were taking them out, they started putting them in places that were far more difficult to remove.
Right. Near the brain where mine is, it's difficult because it's fused into the brain stem itself. It basically, when extraterrestrials abduct people are electrical impulse organisms. They stop the flow of information from the brain to the body. So when I tried to run, my legs didn't work. When I tried to scream, my vocal cords didn't work. But I was perfectly aware of the fact of what was happening to me while these objects were directly in front of me, these entities.
Now, you saw the group that you said were small, the typical grays, when you were 5?
They were grays, small. They were the size of children, very slender. They all wore silver spacesuits, all of them.
Did they have any insignia on their suits, or was just one-piece silver suit?
It was a one-piece, like a bodysuit. They didn't say a word. I could hear their thoughts.
Telepathy, of course.
Yes.
That's how they operate. Now, let me ask you this. What year did you stop working for ABC?
2000.
Okay, so 2 years before the 50-year anniversary of that sighting.
2 years before the 2002 close encounter. In 2001 is when Gordon Jenkins, who was a senior engineer at ABC News, claimed to have seen extraterrestrials around John Glenn during a press conference.
Wow, that blows my mind. But it doesn't surprise
He went crazy.
me either.
He went crazy and died from that, by the way. He went crazy and died from that. Died.
I think that's part of the reason why things like this are suppressed, because they will shake up the world. Not just the economy or theology or politics, but actual fear will induce death.
It does indeed induce death. And in this case, my friend claimed that after contact, that the extraterrestrials were talking to him through a CD player, and people thought he was crazy. Now, wait a minute. I had to think about that for a minute. When we filmed Uncovering Aliens for Discovery in Sedona, Arizona, and I was on top of a mountain, something sent me a message and said to set up my camera in the courtyard at the hotel where I was staying, and I complied to what it was asking me to do. When I set up my camera and set it up in the manner in which it asked me to set my camera up in, within 2 minutes of hitting start, the object, these streaks of light, started to appear on motion picture and fly through the frame, which was the sample which my friend Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the lunar module pilot for Apollo 14, confirmed with his data from Apollo 14 EVA-1, which shows the exact same streaks of light on the lunar surface.
And, you know, I have several interviews of Edgar Mitchell that are released, and several that I didn't release because he was literally degrading physically. I recorded him on the Wednesday before he passed away on the Friday, but I didn't release it. The things, though, he said to me in private that were not recorded, that were not on a radio show, were far more than what he would say privately. And I am fully convinced that we do have ET bases on the moon and probably Mars.
I would concur with you that whatever we're talking about here, the Apollo astronauts first documented what they would not say was an extraterrestrial base on the lunar surface during the Apollo moon program, which is it started at Apollo 11 when they first noticed that these large objects were on the lunar surface watching them. And notice I said large objects. The objects that I'm photographing here on Earth make aircraft carriers look like minnows.
Wow. Like you said, 10, 20 miles or even larger than that?
Big aircraft carriers. Like when I say I had an encounter not so long ago when I went outside and changed the battery on one of my telescopes, and I looked up from my left shoulder to my right shoulder, and I saw one spacecraft, and it stretched from one side of the state to the other, and it was just sitting there. It was a streak of solid light.
Now, I'm sure have you talked to Seth Shostak from SETI?
I talked to Seth, and, I had a really bad experience with him because he became a jokester with it. And, I'm presenting physical evidence that's all consistent. In fact, I do what's called a comparative forensic analysis with these objects. So I can show you one object. I can show you 1,000 different samples, all consistent with that object in motion pictures. So I showed the samples to Seth. And instead of concurring with my conclusion, he started making jokes.
That's pretty sad.
And to me, it was pretty sad because I had him as a contact on LinkedIn. And it got to the point where I had to just disassociate myself with these people because here's SETI, who is supposed to be searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. And here I am with technology which is documenting extraterrestrial intelligence. And here are these people making jokes about it. And to me, that was like getting kicked in the balls because here are people that I was looking at in terms of sharing my information, which is on a consistent forensic basis, on a consistent level. And here they are making jokes about it. So I had to cut them loose. I, in my opinion, just like some of the people I was dealing with at MUFON, which I have great respect for, but there are people there that are there for the ride, and they're not technically qualified to be in the positions that they're in, calling things lens flares or CGI, while in what I present, when somebody is saying to me that, oh, hey, that's CGI, okay, then tell me what CGI program generated that effect. If you're going to use CGI as a device, at least know what CGI software is capable of doing and know the software name that's used to render those effects. Don't just say, oh, it's CGI, and then dismiss it as that. Cell phones don't have CGI technology. So the samples that MUFON was dismissing were personal cell phone videos, which they claimed immediately was generated using CGI.
That actually breaks my heart. And I do know that every time I've had him on, me and him totally disagree. The reason I brought him up is because what they're using SETI to try to make contact, radio waves, is
it's antiquated.
Thank you. You took the word right out of my mouth. Antiquated.
Fred Flintstone, you're looking for aliens, and you're sitting there with something plugged into your ears? What kind of mindless BS is that? here I am. I'm using technology which I will admit I took from NASA. NASA uses advanced imaging technology. I took the same NASA imaging technology and applied steroids to it. So my technology is a million times more sensitive than what NASA is currently using on board the space station. And I'm getting events consistent on a nightly basis. They can't dismiss that data because now the astronauts are seeing the exact same objects I'm documenting around the space station.
And that's why they always stop every time the ISS catches something and it's live streaming.
They drop the feed. They drop the feed.
Yeah, all the time.
They want to keep people in the dark because, the only ones who don't drop the feed is the Russian side. Why is the Russians not holding back the information? And the Russian side's data is absolutely ominous. It makes you wonder why NASA is withholding that information, because the Russian side shows without a doubt Earth is being visited by aliens. Without a doubt.
And has been. Absolutely has been.
Absolutely. 4 years, the Mir space station documented that. Before it crashed into the Earth's orbit from the lack of fuel, it proved that there were spatial portals at the North and South Pole. And you think about it. Here we are on the ball, and this ball is spinning. And at the top of this ball is a magnet. At the bottom of this ball is a magnet. What happens when you spin a magnet? It generates electricity, does it not?
That's right.
And here at the North and South Pole, we have, without a doubt, portals which exit and enter Earth's realm. And they know this, but they don't talk about it. But they won't let you go to the North Pole, and they won't let you go to Antarctica. Why is that? Because they know the aliens are there. They know it. They know it.
They absolutely do. And if you've noticed that Google Earth has even made the holes, the entrances in the Antarctica, and even the underwater base, the entrance in Malibu, completely invisible. It's like they're fuzzy now.
Yeah, they did that. They did that intentionally. Because, see, one of the things you have to consider, Google Earth is not high-res technology. When you have high-res technology, that means there's a lot of data that's being used to generate virtually the realities that you're looking at. Google can't do that because it's a large platform that covers the entire nature of Earth itself. So when you look at it, it's a big low-res program. And a low-res program means that when you zoom into it, your end result is going to be this pixelated imagery. Pixelated are squares. People are interpreting that distortion square area, which is pixelation, as something extraterrestrial, which it is not. It's distortion associated to the technology.
Yet, certain areas that you once could see these anomalies, like this, I don't know how many miles it was wide. I think like 7 miles wide and like 5 miles tall. The entrance in Antarctica, you could see it. It was available for anyone to see. But again, like you said, they won't let us go there. Why?
Well, they have this agreement which they were claiming stops the, I would call it, prostitution of the land, when they take all of the resources from the land. And they came up with this in the early 1950s, right after Operation High Jump, when the Navy got their asses kicked in Antarctica by anomalous objects which they never really defined.
Yes, Admiral Byrd.
Admiral Richard E. Byrd got his ass kicked by aliens, and they know this. The Germans set up a base there because they knew that the aliens were based there, and the Germans made contact with them, and they essentially formed an alliance, and they're now in league with the extraterrestrials. And most of the Nazis that were on Earth at that time have probably gone off-world by now.
That's true. And you know what? Unfortunately, I can't get Robert Bigelow on this show, and I tried for several years, but I did get him on the phone for a quick few moments. He is absolutely convinced and believes that we are being visited and have been visited. It's almost as if he himself had his own sighting, or this is the other alternative. I don't think the government slash military is involved in, like, say, Bob Lazar S4, right, where they had the
Oh yeah,
crafts.
no, it's private. It's private industry taking that extraterrestrial technology and back engineering it. It's
Yeah,
private people. It's private individuals. It's people that are in the what they call the elitists
because
at
they
the
don't have
top.
to answer to Congress or Freedom of Information
There are
Acts.
people that are way above the law, and they are the ones that are calling the shots. That's why I was thankful that the U.S. Navy staff from the Nimitz had the balls enough to come forth with their data. Because, when I took my material to the Pentagon told me that my 4K material didn't have the definition of 480p FLIR. 480p FLIR is 1,000 times, in terms of resolution, smaller than 4K. And I was showing them 4K samples of the same things that they were showing me in 480p FLIR, and they insisted their 480p FLIR had more data associated to it, while here my samples show the Tic Tacs in full color, not monochromatic. So we have a difference in data, but the Air Force was more anal about it than the Navy. So the Air Force said to me that my material didn't show much of nothing because it didn't have that much definition. But wait a minute, when does 4K not have that much definition? So I
It's
knew it was a
a
bullshit
highest
job. It's a bullshit
definition
job.
right now. It is the absolute highest definition you can get, the clearest you can
Look
see.
at my files. All of them are absolutely crystal clear. Now you're going to tell me that has no definition, and I'm showing you 1,700 files of the same ship, and you're going to say it doesn't show nothing.
You know, one thing about FLIR, sure, it recognizes the heat signatures, but does that really matter when you have something that is ambient temperature?
Well, my technology is full spectrum infrared. It's hybrid Hubble. NASA Hubble. If you're familiar with photography, NASA Hubble is ISO 1600, and it's 350 nanometers near infrared to normal vision, which is at 5,000 K color temperature for color balance for daylight. While the Hubble camera that I'm using is 4 million ISO. I mean, it's a million times more powerful than what NASA has in space currently, and it's getting these objects clearly, not out of focus, not somewhat in focus. Clearly, I'm getting these objects and samples. And they're going to sit there and tell you that they can't see anything.
And just like they told us they stopped investigating after Project Blue Book ended in 1969.
That was a lie.
It was a
It's
complete
a lie.
lie.
They've been continually researching this stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, they've been trolling some UFO researchers. I might even say that they've even terminated those people for their material. So how mysterious UFO researchers mysteriously die, there's a reason why. They had something that the government wanted, and the government got it.
That's right. That's right. You have journalists and UFO researchers, those who seem to be on the brink of breaking a story or have possession of something, and they announce that, and all of a sudden, boom, they're dead.
They're dead.
Yeah,
Exactly.
very sad. Now let's talk about the sun for a moment. You've mentioned that there are objects parked near the sun, and I always
Yes.
assumed that that's where they would go to maybe get energy if they even need it. I mean, I know there's speculation of the element 115, which was classified at Los Alamos with the code name LA1000. But even then, I would think that there's a lot of photographs of objects getting near the sun and then some sort of like beam or solar ray hitting them.
I have the same streaks of light, which we're talking about, around the lunar surface and around the solar surface. The U.S. Navy Solar Observatory has been documenting these streaks of light now since 2010 or 2012, and they're using infrared technology in space. I went to Lunt Solar Systems, which is American-based technology, and got a solar telescope designed specifically for solar applications. And I started using that solar telescope using hybrid Hubble technology as my imager, and that's the samples that I sent you. In my samples of the solar surface, I took several photographs, and on one photograph in particular were these spots that were consistent in size, and they were in a row along the surface of the sun, and there was two of them that was off the grid in this row of spots. But in the very next picture, those spots were gone. But then on the first picture where the spots were on the surface of the sun, around the sun itself were, the camera detected objects that had luminous qualities that were brighter than the sun. What can be brighter than the sun?
Nothing that we know of, right?
Nothing that we know of. Nothing that we know of. And here in the sample that I sent you, if you look closely, you have to blow it up with Photoshop. You'll see that around the corona of the sun itself are these what appear to be stars, and they're red, but they're stationary, and there are some of those red spots on the surface of the sun itself also, and they are more intense than the sun itself. So what can be brighter than that? Whatever these objects are, they're there, and the sample clearly shows that.
There is another comment and a question. The first one is from UFO Disclosure TV, which I want to thank again for your super chat. At the end, I'm going to thank everybody for the super chats. I'm going to read it. It says, I think the government allowed the guys from the Nimitz to come out with the information, soft disclosure. What do you say?
I say the government allowed the guys from the Nimitz to come out with a soft disclosure. I say that they were careful in what they were saying. One of the things that's interesting, though they encountered the objects, not one of them tried to shoot them down.
That's right. And if they could, how could they if they're operating?
They couldn't. This thing was making the F-18s, made them look like kids' toys, according to what some of these pilots were saying. They say the object, they would lock onto it, then the minute they were ready to do something, it was gone.
Gone. Yeah. Split second gone. Okay.
Gone.
This is from Hadley Scott McIntyre. It says, ask him about the crystal chambers ruins in Saturn's orbit.
I was reading something about that not so long ago, and they're saying that the rings of Saturn are being maintained by something. Maintained by something. What does that mean, maintained by something? Something is making sure the rings stay intact? How is that possible? That object that's maintaining those rings is a spacecraft, which I've got a friend, Jimmy Roberts, in Texas, who has a sample from the rings of Saturn, and the rings of Saturn showing this object, the objects we're discussing right now, showing them around the rings of Saturn.
This is from Metalhead. Do you know anything about the anomalies in the Soho images?
No, I do not. I'm definitely going to look that up.
Speaking of what you mentioned about the Saturn's rings, though, John Lear turned me on to some literature which actually showed a huge object right where the rings were. You know, it blew my mind.
Was it a white streak of light?
Yes.
There we go. They know these objects are here. The Martian rover took a photograph of these objects in the atmosphere of Mars flying by. We've got samples of the same objects during Phobos, the Phobos satellites, which were destroyed by these objects in 1986 or 1989, one of the years. I might be incorrect, but I know it's 1981 of those during Operation Phobos. So we've got samples of these all along, and the samples from the lunar surface during Apollo 14 with Dr. Edgar Mitchell's EVA-1. So we've got proof that they're here. We've got proof from Grumman, 308-1960. We've got all of this evidence and samples that people are getting on their cell phones. But yet, the government says and does nothing about them.
You know,
they call them shooting stars.
Yeah, and that's just crazy. You know, in 1990, when I was in Greece, this is before the Soviet Union collapsed. This is the second sighting I had. We were going from one village to another, and we were crossing a forest in the night. We saw my family and the taxi driver. You know, it was 5 of us. What looked like a round object, a sphere, with 10 or 12 smaller tails behind it. And the way I could describe it color wise was, imagine the color of the moon, only brighter. And it didn't go
Yes.
down, it wasn't going up, it just went across really fast and really slow. And because Greece was a neutral country, of course they contacted the Soviets, they contacted the Americans, and they said, did anything happen? What does NASA have to say? No spacecraft were returning, no satellites were crashing, no asteroids, no meteors, nothing, absolutely nothing. And for the next 3 days, that dominated the news. But unfortunately, it's a small country, and I don't think even today, they have the budget to investigate
Oh
something
no,
like this.
they're definitely blocked by bigger entities like the United States from divulging information that could be damaging to any of the countries. Because what happens in one country, it's going to happen here also. So you have to keep that in mind. But the issues that we're having are the government knowing about this and what they think the people are going to do in a response if they were to find out about this. They think that it would destabilize society, and it definitely would destabilize society, because think about it. Here we got people running this country, and we've got all of our faith and our trust in these people, the people we voted into office, to make sure things go right, to make sure laws are correct for us, to make sure things are copacetic, as they say. But the realities are things are not, and that there's something rather nefarious associated to the way things are happening within Congress today, how things are being destabilized with, bringing in, basically putting ISIS in office, which they did with some of these people that are in Congress right now. They put these militant Islamic people in office, in position. And these people are talking about the way America does business with other countries, how America does business with Israel, how America does business with Russia, how America does business with France, how America does business with England. They talk about this. And they don't talk about the fact that it has everything to do with national security, and that we do things for a reason, that we have to secure our ways in the things that we must find secure with our society. But these people are destabilizing that, because I believe they want to open the door for a full-scale invasion, not from people, but from what's coming.
There is another question here. This is Nicholas Cashmore. Wilbur, what do you know about the ninth move of Saturn, Dogon's origin?
Not much at all. Not much at all. But there's talk about how these moons look like they were shaped and assembled like that one moon that has a rim around it. That's definitely odd. Or the moons that have the hexagonal poles, which are associated with, I believe, Jupiter or Saturn, one of those planets which has a very odd north and south pole. So with all of these coincidences associated to these planets and all of these moons that have similarities associated to these planets, you can assume with some sense of reasonable doubt that whatever these things are, they're not, I won't say man-made, but extraterrestrial-made objects, spacecraft that are designed for specific applications, and their planetary needs are much broader than what we can anticipate. We're talking planetary scale technology.
It just blows my mind how all this technology can really change everything on Earth. The way we drive, we wouldn't need fossil fuels anymore. The way we power our homes, the air conditionings, and the way we travel to space and beyond. And yet they're keeping this a secret. And I do know that everything starts with military applications and it trickles down to us. Just like you were mentioning earlier, the private corporations who are, above the law, the elitists, and that's pretty scary.
Call them paramilitary.
Paramilitary.
Because they have military qualities while being private industry. But basically, their military businesses run their military established businesses that they put in the private sector. It's military, private sector.
And, it just blows my mind that, are they trying to just dominate the earth, one nation? I mean, what is really going at hand? Because, see, when Orson Welles read uh, War of the Worlds, 80 years ago or so. Okay, I could understand how far more people are very religious, but the technology we have now, if I took apart this iPhone that I'm looking at, or this computer in front of me, or this other one, or all this technology, I have no idea how it works. I don't know how to turn it on, but I don't know how it
Came from
works.
Roswell. Came from
Exactly.
Roswell.
Yes, yes, that's what I was going to lead to. So I'm assuming you read the book The Day After Roswell by Philip Corso?
I was, very, very good friends with Stanton Friedman. And Phil and Stanton Friedman were associates, from what I understand. And Stanton was highly into, the what was supposed to have happened with Majestic 12 and the people in the Pentagon in the early UFO studies from way back when the Roswell crashes took place. So basically, with everything and the military people like Philip Corso, who came out and talked about this, he did that on his deathbed, by the way, because he knew that if he had said it before he had died, that he'd lose his pension. And, these military guys, they do 20 years in service, and after the 20 years, you get paid royally. But they'll take that away from you faster than you can say your name if you do something wrong. They take it from you. They know how to take you out. And the only way to take a person out is to take them out financially. If you take a person out financially, they're dead.
And that's why Philip Corso, I believe, waited till the end of his life, and I
Yes.
believe it was after 6 months from the time he released the book when it was published, when he passed away. And that also begs the question: was it a natural death, or was it something that was unnatural because he was talking?
Induced death, just like Richard E. Byrd was pushed out a window at Walter Reed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Forrest General or not Forrestal, the Secretary of is it the Secretary of Defense? James Forrestal, him too, pushed
Yes.
out. Yeah,
Yes.
very very sad. Okay,
Well, I mean, we're talking about they knew something that whoever didn't want them to know, and they had to be taken out to stop that information from flowing, and they were taken out.
here's a few more questions for you. Let me backtrack to make sure I get them all here. All right. Okay, Rockstar says, how much of this research is actually documented?
What research?
I'm assuming the what we're talking about with the sun, the objects in the sun, the Pentagon.
I'm not sure because see, keep in mind, I'm a independent researcher. I don't look at what everybody else is doing because not everybody else is using the same technology that I'm doing. I believe that I'm a leader in my field of imaging technology. So with that in mind, I look at what other people are doing, and some of it is absolutely consistent with what I'm doing. Some of it is not. The technology used, I understand a lot of people don't have a lot of money, and this is a field that requires, if you're going to have technology to document UFOs, it's not going to be cheap. And the type of technology that I'm using is not cheap. It also requires a level of intelligence to operate it. It requires a level of intelligence to edit the video, the software the information it generates in video, it has to be edited. So there's a lot of factors to consider when you go out there and you try to look for UFOs, and the technology factor is one of them. But most of the people that I know that do UFO research are extremely limited technologically. They would be, in my opinion, equivalent to Fred Flintstone in terms of what they're using for technology to do research that requires advanced tech to fully document.
Kind of like what we mentioned with Seth Shostak using radio waves.
Exactly. Listening for an event, while if they were looking, they would see the exact same things I'm seeing in space with my Hubble technology. How am I getting these objects nightly on a daily basis? See, that's what they're not addressing. How do I get something in a fixed region of space? And all the samples I have, if you look at my YouTube channel, people are leaving my YouTube channel, by the way, because they believe I'm uploading the same files over and over again. But it's not the same files. I can show you an event that I documented July 13th, 2013 in Washington, D.C., that repeated July 13th, 2014, that repeated July 13th, 2015, that repeated July 13th, 2016. And I could put all four of those videos in a row, and you'll think it's the same video, but it's not. It's 4 years, 365 days apart. Exactly. But nobody talks about that. And they're doing the same thing. How do I get the same thing every year on the same day? That's physically impossible.
You know, that actually reminds me of the turkey footage that Roger Lear was on the last one. He didn't photograph it, but he saw it. And it seemed to me like, since they have the ability to go faster than light, create wormholes, etc., what if they're in the same place and then they just decide to skip a year or years just to see what's happening then? And that may
My
very well
data
be.
suggests that is real. What you're saying is absolutely real. I'm again saying it repeated July 13th, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, exactly the same. And I can show you the video. How is that possible? There's two of the years that I have that if I put the videos on top of each other, you'll think it's the same video running. They're exact, 100%. But the problem is, this video is 365 days apart from the last one, and the last one, and the one before that. So that says there's a repeat in time, or I'm stuck in a time warp.
I think they have the ability to go back and forth in time. And it's just as easy as almost turning a dial, but it's also more evidence shows that their craft is even controlled by telepathy.
It is. And that's why I'm telling you, they let me know they're there, and that's why I'm showing them to you on video, because they let me know they're there, and they let me film them.
Here's a couple more questions for you. Okay, this is from Nicholas Cashmore. Wilbur, do you think it is possible for UFOs to send electromagnetic photos to humans?
It's called telepathy, yes.
Lasha Senyak asks, why can't these anomalies be natural phenomenon?
When you look at all the natural phenomena that's documented, we're talking about, there are people of science starting from as early as the 1100s, and not one of them's documented anything like that. Do you think that's natural?
No.
If I can show you something, and I do, and I make this point to people, I show them a plethora of evidence, which I call a comparative forensic analysis. It's comparative because everything I put in this folder shows the same object. And then inside this folder is 1,849 files. You know, I can show you one, I can show you two, I can show you three. But if I have to show you 1,849 files to convince you that this object is real, I know I have a problem with the person that's looking at the data because they don't believe what they're seeing, or they're incapable of absorbing that information.
Oh, I absolutely know some people like Michael Shermer and who are private individuals who are not in the Skeptic Association, who even if they saw a craft with beings come out, they would think it is one of our craft with one of our genetically modified humans or something like that. Almost
Stuck
nothing.
on stupid.
Pretty much. It's pretty sad.
Yeah, it's real sad.
This question you already answered multiple times. I'm just going to read it. It's from Metalhead. Do you have any compelling evidence that you found personally? And yes, you did.
Well, that's what we're talking about here. All the evidence we're talking about are the files that I physically generated. So that means I'd have to experience them. And I have problems with people that question that. Now, they're going to question the fact of the file is one thing, but to question the person that witnessed it is another. If you were not there, how can you question one's integrity? That's another thing, which a lot of American people seems to be able to do liberally. They can make a statement and have expertise while not even being part of whatever they're talking about. They just know. And, you know, and I don't know what kind of liberties you have on your show, but there's a word for people called bullshit artists, and that's what they are.
Oh, you could say whatever you want. Don't worry. Some
No,
days...
okay, well, okay. I didn't want. I wanted to keep it as clean as possible, but we're talking basically about a bunch of people, which I call wannabes, And they want to be out there so much that they'll say and do anything to get attention while not having a shred of evidence. Well, here I'm talking about a specific anomaly which was documented by Grumman in 1960 that's still in our airspace, and I'm showing you examples of it in Ultra HD 4K, and I've got a ton of the evidence to show that it's here, but yet the people who look at this data still question if it's real. Like, wait a minute, 1,800 files and you don't think it's real? So, there we know the problem is not the information,
It's them.
but the people processing the information. They're incapable of accepting the unknown. They want everything to be like Star Wars. They want everything to be like, like Hollywood, which it's not.
If they can't be convinced with 1,800 files, they can't be convinced with 18 million files.
You can lead a horse to the water and you can't make them drink. That statement is so true. But my father said something to me that was really profound. He said, empty barrels make the most noise. Empty barrels make the most noise. And they do. You roll an empty barrel, it makes a whole bunch of noise. All these people making all this noise, talking all this bullshit, they're not saying much of nothing because they have no proof. But yet these people fall for the story. I'll go to UFO conferences, and people telling stories will get standing applause, and I'll sit there and I'll show hours worth of UFO, and when I finish, the room is absolutely silent. No applause, nothing.
That's bullshit because,
They're spooked. They're spooked.
They are, and I think part of it has to do with ego. That's why I stopped going years ago, and the other part has to do with they think they know it all. And I'm not trying to knock one investigator
I'm not
on,
either, and we're talking about some people here. I work for the History Channel, and it's like a league. I'm in league with these people, but there are people on the History Channel that do UFO research, won't even talk about my stuff or show it because they want to be out front with their thing, while the realities are they're not really UFO researchers. They're people out there looking for other people's evidence, and they find evidence and they talk about it. They didn't really get that data themselves. They got somebody else who did it, and they listen to that person's story, and they go out front and they try to present it like, here, I have the evidence that this UFO was here, and blah, blah, blah. They didn't do crap. While here I'm showing you nightly in all of the locations that I did research in the same spacecrafts. Everywhere, Washington, D.C., the North Pole, here in Virginia, in Kokomo, Indiana, in Shreveport, Louisiana, the same spacecrafts. How is that possible?
Metalhead has a clarification to the question about the compelling evidence. He says, what I meant was the most compelling... Hold on, that just left. Too many chats. Let me go back and find it. Where are you? What I meant was, what's the most compelling story/evidence you have found? If of all the cases, pick one.
I will say the event I documented 105-2017 in Washington, D.C. 105-2017, I documented this tubular object. The tubular object was 3 times the size of an aircraft carrier. It had the qualities associated to what the Navy calls the Tic Tac, except this thing was big like a city. And I saw it fly by me on the street one day on 13th and Monroe Street in Washington, D.C. I was along with 15 other people, and we looked up and we saw this giant tube fly by over a building and vanish, just like in Star Trek.
And
it just
silent, too, right?
In silent, 100% silent. But I've got video associated to it. But what really blew my mind was the morning that I documented that, I went to Whole Foods to get something to eat. At a table at Whole Foods was 17 or 18 absolutely luscious blondes with perfect bodies, perfect eyes. Everything about these chicks was like stunning. They were also gorgeous. I started babbling. They started to scare me. That's how I felt. And then I find out that the occupants of these tube-like spacecraft are these extraterrestrials with blonde hair and blue eyes. And here I saw at Whole Foods a table of, well, I'll say extraordinary babes. They made Victoria's Secret models look like shit. They were that gorgeous, and it scared me.
You know, it's actually, I've heard that account so many times that when they are in that form of the Homo sapien form, when they look like us, they are absolutely perfect. Blonde, blue eyes,
Stunning,
muscular for the men,
stunning,
and women just drop dead
stunning.
gorgeous.
You start drooling. I couldn't talk when I looked at them. I started babbling. I've never had that happen to me before because they scared me. They were that beautiful. Like, oh my God, I would have married each of them. That's how
I
fine they were.
would have
Each
want
of them I
all of
would have
them. That's
married.
what I would have wanted.
All of them. I'm telling you, how do you marry a whole table full of? I would have taken all of them. All of them. That's how gorgeous they were.
You know, this actually reminds me of a story that Timothy Good, you know Timothy Good, the researcher in the UK, right?
Timmy is a good friend of mine in the UK. Timmy is a very good friend of mine.
Then you probably know the story where he was giving a lecture at a conference and he got the feeling that this presenter was non-terrestrial, and in his mind he said, if you are not from this planet, touch your, I think it was your right index finger to your nose, and immediately that figure did. The scariest part is that the lecture was supposed to be about the future of Earth. And afterwards, when that person just disappeared, when Timothy was sitting at a table with all the other people who were there watching this, not one person could remember it. It's almost as if the information was given to them and locked in their head for a certain time when it's going to be released.
Hold that thought. On August the 3rd in 2008, an orange sphere landed in front of me and 17 other people. We were in a group of people. We were working on a music video. This orange sphere landed in the trees. It didn't burn the tree itself. It looked like a hot sun landing in the trees. To this day, and I took pictures of the event, not one of the 18 people I was with remembers what happens.
You know, and again, it's very similar. And you know what? I wish more and more people would come out. I strongly believe, because if me and you were doing this, say, 30 years ago, we'd be laughed at. But now every cable network has at least one show on this. And I'm starting to believe that. Did you see the Joe Rogan interview with Bob Lazar?
I have Jeremy Corbell on my page, and he does Bob Lazar's interview also.
Yeah, he's a great friend of mine. I go back with him. The one thing that stuck out to
Jeremy
me
is
was
a cool dude. I like him. I like the way he does things. By the way, he's not holding back like the rest of these people who try to make a story out of it. He's trying to do this expeditiously, and he's trying to do it as directly as possible. But it's like I got to give him his propers and my hat's off to him. I have to say that he's doing an excellent job, and that the people that he's putting out there are doing a good job trying to disseminate the information and give us a level of disclosure. But a lot of the guys are not touching the actual facts of the matter. And here I've got this data, tons of it, and it says without a doubt, aliens are here.
And
nobody wants to see it.
And they've been
here. It's starting in 2002. All the data I have is consistently the same, including the close encounter I had at the U.S. Capitol building in 2002. I didn't have motion picture technology then, but the objects I documented in 2002, I now have on motion picture, now that I have motion picture technology, which indicates that they never left. They're still in the Washington, D.C. airspace.
Now, another thing we know is that when a UFO goes into the water, it becomes a USO. And they are able to travel so fast underwater, it's as if they are themselves enveloped in this gravity field that they're not actually touching the water.
I documented a USO in the Potomac River. It was winter. The water was choppy, meaning, with tides, you could see the boats rocking because of the choppiness associated to it. But in the river was a stationary modulating red, white, and blue light. It was stationary. The boats would sway left and right from the tidal forces associated to the forces of nature. But this light didn't have any effect whatsoever It was not affected by the tidal forces at all. It maintained 100% stationary positioning while I was imaging it submerged in the Potomac River. And shortly afterwards, a person about 10 miles upriver witnessed a star-like object leave the water and go directly into space during that event that I documented. So we have documentation of USOs in the Washington, D.C. area. And I believe that some of the people, which was another thing I had to mention about the event that I documented at 105 in 2017 when I saw the blondes, that night, 37 people, including their cell phone signatures, mysteriously disappeared simultaneously.
Wow.
Mysteriously disappeared. Like, 1 minute they're there, they're gone the next. And your cell phone, you can take the battery out of your cell phone. It will still tell people where you are.
Yeah, triangulation. Yeah.
Exactly. Even with that in mind, all those people who vanished, even their cell phone signatures, all vanished simultaneously. They mysteriously vanished without a trace. On the nights that I documented events in Washington, D.C., people were vanishing, and nobody said anything about it.
That's a large number of people in D.C., of all cities.
In D.C., and I've got to say something absolutely abstract. And most of the people that were vanishing were African American. And if you know anything about cellular biology, dark meat on a chicken is tender. Dark meat on a turkey is tender. African Americans are dark-skinned, and that their cellular definition is definitely different. You could touch an African American person, they feel a little softer. I believe that they're taking African Americans because they're easier to consume.
Consume as in to eat?
Eat, yes. Edibles.
You know, I heard that one of the things they like to eat specifically is the adrenal glands.
Yeah.
The reason why I mentioned Bob Lazar earlier is because what's not shown in Jeremy Corbell's movie, which I really wish was more expanded upon, is if Bob Lazar was shown those 121 briefings and the briefing that he read about what he was working on, the propulsion and power of that one craft, if that was true, who's to say that all the other overviews were not true? I would really love to know what's all about those and what's in those, all details. And the other
They're not going to give you that, though. They're not going to give you that because what you're asking for is something that's detrimental to national security. And if we know that extraterrestrial technology exists, it's going to destabilize government. It's going to destabilize church. It's going to destabilize society as we know it, according to the Brookings Institution.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the Vatican holds a lot of secrets. A billion
oh, yeah, of
people.
course. They know. They got dead aliens in there. They got dead aliens buried in the Vatican. They talked about them. In fact, what they were calling and deemed as demons were indeed extraterrestrials.
So, and this is something I always say, or not always, but a lot of times say, in the old paintings of angels, when you see wings, I don't think that the artist all the time was representing somebody who had wings. They were representing that this individual had the ability to fly in a craft or something like that.
Yes, they didn't recognize, you talk about chariots of fire, the rings of fire. There's just too many inconsistencies to everything that we're talking about here. And, one of the main factors that I bring to most of the conversations that I have when I do have interviews are the pyramids in Egypt. The hieroglyphics indicate various levels of individuals that constructed the pyramids, starting from these super big people all the way down to what looked like small ant-sized people, which represented normal-sized people. And that we know for a fact that the Smithsonian Institute in the 1900s destroyed the physical evidence associated to the realities of giants. And giants did exist. They did exist. So when you look at the pyramids, a human can't possibly have done that. It's impossible. Impossible. But a giant, on the other hand, could.
That actually is absolutely true. Michael Cremo, he showed me this newspaper article that was from the late 1800s in Catalina. And what they show in the museum is they removed the skeleton and they removed the article. But what he shows is the entire thing. I don't know how he got his hands on it, but they, like you said, giants have existed for a long, long time. I don't know if you could corroborate his evidence, but he said one particular skeleton was found in California that dates back to 5 million years ago. That is a long, long time ago, far longer than even our primates.
Well, yeah, they've got that giant footstep that's embedded in rock, which is obviously a human footprint that's 5 or 6 feet long. I mean, why are they not talking about this? And the reason why they're not talking about this because whomever wants to keep us, at the apex of technology, of the apex of power, which we're not. We're actually ass backward primates. Even now, what we're talking about, and the extraterrestrials probably thinking, God, what a bunch of retards. Because they have more advanced technology, more advanced information, more advanced everything than we do. And we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs with nothing, trying to figure it out. And what we do have, they don't really know. Nuclear energy, we don't really know how to use it. And you could see that. We don't know what's going on with nuclear energy because they can't control Fukushima yet.
That's right. That's right.
We're just a bunch of clusterfucks. I hate to say that, but everybody has just messed things up to the point where we technically do need extraterrestrial intervention to make things right.
Well, it's like you mentioned, Fukushima. How many years now is it still leaking radiation into the water? I don't think it's in the Pacific only anymore. It had to have spread totally throughout all the oceans.
Next time you buy sushi, take a radiation Geiger counter with you and measure the radiation coming off your tekamaki.
It's a scary thing. It's really a scary thing what we have screwed up on this planet ourselves. And our mindset, the military mindset, the first time we find a technology, what do we do with it? We find a way to weaponize it.
Yeah, use it against each other.
Yes.
And, that's greedy. It shows essentially immaturity associated to the individuals that call themselves men, women in power. Immaturity, meaning they're not mature at all. They're like little kids fighting over a water pistol.
Very, very much so. And that's, I don't know what we can do to change that, but I do think
Nothing.
It's just like what Ronald Reagan said, though, in his speeches at the UN and the high school. If we were faced with, it doesn't even have to be an alien threat. If we were told the truth, then we would stop squabbling with each other on this.
But we're not. They're not. You see that they want to keep it. They want to keep us under wraps. Once you have everything under wraps and you got everything under control, all hell can break loose. It doesn't matter because you've got everything under wraps. And they do it. They have stuff hell could have broken loose already. We don't know that. They're keeping it such a secret. But the military does say, oh, we should be aware of things that are coming. Wait a minute. Things that are coming. What about things that are here?
That's right.
Now. And my samples say they're here now. Like I would set up tonight, but I have a dental appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not going to do it tonight. So, it's like no matter what I do, and no matter how much data I put out there, in my opinion, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere because, like the last streak of light that I put up, which was on, I'm not looking at my website right now, but a couple of days ago, it is as effective as the clip that I put up 8 years ago, which maybe has 40 hits on it. So, no one is looking at it. It's like, everyone thinks it's a meteor or a shooting star. But wait a minute, how do you get a meteor and shooting star every night?
Yeah.
That's impossible.
We're CGI. That's the current excuse.
Yeah. Well, I taught Autodesk technology, which is what they use to make special effects for motion pictures in graduate school. So I would be a person that possibly would be the type of person that could fraudulently generate that kind of data. But I don't. I don't need to do that. I just stick my camera out there and let the cameras record it. I don't have to do squat. Here it is. But even with the forensics associated with what I do, it's not believable with most of the people that look at it.
And I don't know what else we can do. We're holding this conversation. Everybody in the chat room is clearly interested, and I believe they truly believe because, like I said earlier, most of us that are interested and almost obsessed with this. I've been obsessed with this for 35 years. Why? Because I myself saw something, and it wasn't just me. It was at least 30 people in my vicinity that saw something. And then again, 6 years later. And it just blows my mind how people want to
Now,
pass it by. Oh, that was a weather balloon. Or that was just
how
some
many of
lights in
those
the
people that
sky.
you were with remember what happened? That's the other thing. We're talking about people that you were with and people I was with. And the people I was with, you ask them today, what did you see? They're like, oh, what are you talking about? They don't know. But you were there. You were standing with me. They don't know. They can't remember. Where did that information go?
It's
If
because
you were there, how could
want
you
their
forget something?
they want their minds, or because of fear they're shutting it out, or because of the mainstream
Yeah.
spreading lies that they're shutting it down. We knew about Area 51 from the Soviet satellites, only it wasn't even announced as a military installation until what, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, under Obama.
Those streaks of light are based at Area 51. My first contact with the streak of light was outside the perimeter of Area 51, and I documented it. It told me to pack my shit and leave immediately, and I did. And within 1 minute, the BBC crew that I was with, they were arrested by humans. But I got out of there with the data. I got the data, and I can show it. That Area 51 is an alien base. And those streaks of light that I'm showing you in all of the videos that I submitted originate from Area 51.
Now, we have S4 15, 17 miles south of the Groom Lake bed, Papoose Lake bed, where Bob Lazar said he worked at. And 30 years later, we have some people confirming that there actually was a Sector 4 and S4. But other people are saying, well, this is no longer in the hands of the Air Force or special
It's private
projects,
industry now.
EJG.
It's either
Yes.
private industry or the aliens took it over, and they know
Yes.
this.
And
And they have restricted that area just like they did Antarctica and the Arctic Circle. There's areas in the Arctic Circle you cannot go, just like in Antarctica. So they know where these aliens are. It's not a treaty to protect the mineral resources. That's all bullshit. It's protecting the extraterrestrial bases that are there right now.
And the sad thing is I do know that we have maglev trains. I mean, they're pictures of these giant machines, nuclear powered, that literally burrow through the ground. And what they do is they heat the sand, whatever you want to call it, the dirt underneath us, to such a high degree it turns into a glass. So it creates tunnels at the same time that it is going through, and so
Yes,
creating this tunnel. So the
it's NASA technology.
yes, and so I wouldn't be surprised after Bob talked that those 9 craft were moved out.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bradshaw Ranch in Sedona, Arizona, but the Bradshaw Ranch has the same ground sensors as Area 51 surrounding that ranch itself. And while filming Uncovering Aliens, the streak of light that I documented that, in my opinion, was maybe 5 or 10 miles long, stopped over the Bradshaw Ranch and vanished. And I've got that on film. So they didn't want us to go to Bradshaw Ranch, but the evidence that I documented clearly indicates Bradshaw Ranch and Area 51 are connected. In fact, there's a tunnel that goes from Bradshaw Ranch to Area 51.
Wow. And same thing with Edwards Air Force Base, same thing, connects to Area 51 underneath.
China Lake was generated. There's a nuclear submarine base that was fabricated by one of these machines. That's what they're talking about. China Lake is it's in the desert. How do you have a submarine base in the desert?
That's right. That's absolutely right. It's ironic you mentioned that, because when John Lear first told me that, I had to see that sign for myself. And now there's much more knowledge coming out that it's not just a submarine mock-up where they're training, that there actually is the ocean connecting to Nevada underneath.
Absolutely. And they used it, and that's the technology that the aliens were using to, we could have a base right now directly in front of us, underground, or cloaked in the sky above us. But I'm betting it's underground because that's a place where we're ground dwellers and we're not burrowing into the ground and doing all the things like a bug or a mole would do. But if we look underground and underwater, all the bases, everything that we're talking about, we're going to find there. Not on the surface, not where people can see. They did a great job concealing themselves because they know humans don't live underground. So what better place to put your base, underground or underwater? Humans don't go underwater a lot either.
That's true. We don't, and we can only go to a limited depth. That's right. That's right. We do have the technology to go further, but that's not what they're telling us.
No, they're not going to tell you that. And you know, they also in Antarctica drilled into a lake that hadn't seen the sunlight for 5 or 6 million years. So that means that primordial bacteria that they have access to are viruses that they can use to make people sick. Now, when flu season comes, isn't it kind of odd everybody gets the flu at the same time? I believe that these pharmaceuticals put the flu virus in the air intentionally to sell their products.
Yes.
People get sick intentionally. They make you intentionally sick to buy this to make you better. And, you know, there's no cure for anything. There's always something that maintains it. Every commercial on television is about a drug that a human has to take to stay alive.
You know, Big Pharma, unfortunately, and especially in America, they charge so much more for medicine than our neighbors. And you know they have so many cures. And like you said with the flu, they want us to have the flu. Why? Because then we're going to pay for, what is it, flucozone? I can't even know the name of it. But it's...
all the crap that they sell, floconase and all this other stuff.
Go.
You know, it's a genetically modified, it's a molecule of something. While the cure for cancer is alkaline water or sound, while, you know, the ailments that most people have that are associated to foods and the acids that they consume, it's primarily because they don't know what the body is supposed to intake, and they buy all this fast food garbage, and they buy all of this restaurant food garbage instead of eating the foods that we're supposed to be eating, vegetables, fruits, fish, things that are not necessarily beefy, that are killing people. The diseases associated to most humans are generated from the foods that they eat. Diabetes, obesity, heart disease, everything is from what we consume.
And you know,
and they do that intentionally.
I heard not too long ago, I was talking with my doctor, one of my doctors, unfortunately, because that's what they want us to pay. They want us to pay for doctors. That's a whole industry. And what he said is that food pyramid that came out in the 50s is total bullshit. Go back 150 years, what we were eating. That's the way we should be eating. 150 years ago, 2,000 years, that's a healthy diet, not this processed sugar, high fructose
they're adding nitrates and chemistry, the stuff that monosodium glutamate, which technically is not bad for you. People think MSG is bad for you, and it's not. It's like, what are we going into here? Synthetic sugars, which are making people sick. The sweeteners they're using in Diet Cokes and Diet Sodas are making people actually sicker. It does not make you lose weight. It makes you actually gain more weight. I mean, it's like everything that they have set up for us and everything that we believe to be true is not. It's all bullshit. It's all a lie. The UFO thing especially that. Aliens have been coming here since the Earth began. They know this because for some reason it's a system. This spinning ball and its magnetic fields that are generating these wormholes, it's like a vacation spot for extraterrestrials. They can get here easily and they can leave here easily. And they know that. It's basically, we're just a ball with a bunch of life forms on it that really don't mean much of nothing, and aliens come here and they're basically experimenting on us and eating us.
Now, have you talked to Clifford Stone?
No, I don't know Clifford Stone.
Clifford Stone was the one that said he was with the Army Crash and Retrieval Unit. He was part of 17 crashes, and he, at the time in the late 80s when he started to talk about it, he said that we had documented 57 different species that have been visiting us. I think the
Yeah,
number has been far higher than that.
much higher. But they're not talking about the ones that are more intelligent that can control society. They're in league with those, like the Illuminati. There's somebody pulling the strings to everything. Whoever it is has ultimate power. It can't be a human. It can't be a human. It can't be nothing theological like Satan or a demon. We can't even talk about that because we're talking about advanced societies, advanced life forms that are not indigenous to our planet, and they're here. And they see that they can take over simple-minded people and manipulate societies and governments and make things happen that, technically shouldn't happen. Like the cell phones we're talking about right now. Technologically speaking, we should not be in the level of technology we're in right now. We should be a little bit more primitive than we are. But humans are essentially the Borg, and they assimilate. And they assimilated the technology that came out of the skies, and we're using that technology right now to hold this conversation.
It's true. That's absolutely true. And 30, 40 years ago, how could we have done this? And I believe it absolutely came down from the technology that we received from them.
Exactly. We're not that smart. And, when someone says to me, oh, it could be one of ours, you tell me in the 1960s when we had technology that cloaked. We didn't. So the 1960s documented, and the 1940s actually documented objects that cloaked. So that can't be one of ours. But people want to give us the accolades and credentials we do not have. We're so great and we can do this, that, and the other, which we're not. And we can't do a lot because when you think about it, wouldn't you like to transport from one part of this planet to another without having to get in your car, like in Star Trek, and on a transporter pad and transport to that location? Of course, that technology does exist.
Yeah, it does. And what's unfortunate is that we have not had our hands on it, and
So it's aliens.
only select
Got it.
few.
They got it.
They do.
Yeah.
Do.
I mean, I've got proof, like we were talking about. The samples I get, these objects are not like a meteor, and you see a meteor streak through the sky. These objects materialize into the airspace, then streak through the sky. They're not flying here. They're entering through a pathway in which they are using technologies, a Stargate technology, spatial portal technology, which they self-generate. NASA's research with the Bermuda Triangle and the Alaska Triangle indicated that those events happen along the equator because of the deviations in the magnetic field, and they happen along in the North Pole, along the Mount Hayes area where I did my research for the History Channel because of deviations in the magnetic pole, which is correct. But it's not associated to the magnetic field in those areas at all. It can be located anywhere. These objects appear anywhere. So NASA's data is flawed. NASA's data wants to limit these events that we're talking about to the Bermuda and Alaska triangles, and I'm showing you events in Washington, D.C. I'm showing you events here in Virginia. I'm showing you events in Kokomo, Indiana. I mean, the same events that we're talking about are happening everywhere. These extraterrestrials have established a stronghold in our planet, and nobody seems to notice that.
And we do know that there is a lot of activity, USO activity, right here off the California coast between Los Angeles and Catalina.
Yes.
Almost as if there's a base underneath.
There is a base there, and they know that. But, they're trying to soft disclose it, but then that kind of softly went away, like you said, on your Google Earth maps. Now you can't find it. So, they know that with that kind of information out there, think about it. If Google put the location of all the alien bases out there, people with money would set up expeditions and go to those locations. Logically, that's what is happening. A person with financial means has the ability to go to spots and do research where, and we're talking about UFO researchers like myself, and where I do research in the locations that I go, the television networks specifically pay me to go there to do this research and get the data. So I do that as a job, and I do it with a means which is scientifically sound. So I document everything to the best of my ability using the best possible technology money has to offer. And here I'm showing you the evidence in a clear manner. Clearly, I show you this material that I'm able to generate. But even there, that's not enough, because I think they want my kidney. I think they want my leg associated with this. Because, how much more can I show you to convince you? If you're not capable of accepting that information that's being fed to you, then you need to step off and let somebody else take your place and try to figure it out where you can't. Because, we're dealing with an intelligence factor here, and most of the problems that we have on Earth is basically associated to stupidity. And most people, and I hate to say it, including myself, are stupid.
We all are.
We're stupid.
We have
We're
to
all
start
stupid.
by admitting that. And I hope no one gets offended by this,
I'm
but it's
not
true.
being offensive. I'm hoping no one is getting offended by this. But, here I am, and I'm showing you data, and I'm a UFO researcher, and I'm telling you I'm stupid compared to somebody more advanced.
Now, here's another question, actually, before I'm going to ask mine. I'm just going to read it. I haven't read it yet. It just popped up. This is from La Chasenia again. Does he think any of the alien races are fighting amongst themselves or warring with other aliens?
Yeah, that's happening right now. It's like they're factions, the ones who want to take control and ones who want to take that control away from the others, and the technology that's associated to it. I think Independence Day, the second film that they did, was more consistent with what's happening now, because other alien technology is trying to come here and help us to fight off whatever these entities are that are trying to take over. And, you have to look at the truthfulness associated to most stories Hollywood puts out there, because there's a margin of truthfulness associated to everything that we see. They've got to get this information from somewhere to make these movies. Think about that. So we're dealing with aliens that are here, and we're dealing with events that obviously are beyond the means of human technology. And yet, we still doubt the validity of extraterrestrials in our airspace.
Do you think that we are an alien ant farm? Do you think that's one of the reasons why they're trying to hide us? Because if we look how we were jump-started in our society, like you mentioned with the pyramids.
Yeah, wait a minute. We've got alien DNA, so we may indeed be extraterrestrials. There's DNA which they cannot identify, which they say is extraterrestrial. So if we have extraterrestrial DNA that they can't identify, then that means, technically, we are not indigenous to this planet. We are aliens.
That's actually a good point. I had this conversation with someone not too long ago that we are not indigenous to this planet for multiple reasons.
At all.
For one, look at our circadian rhythm. That our clock within, it's actually more suitable for Mars. And
exactly.
It's just, when you think about things like this, it blows my mind, yet that's what reality really is.
Exactly. We that I've heard this so many times. We are essentially living in a matrix. I know you've heard that, the Matrix, like the Matrix film. It may indeed be a reality.
Yes. I've heard that multiple times, and I actually believe that.
It may indeed be a reality, yes.
Now, I know I've been asking for this for so many years, and even the president, maybe George Herbert or H.W. Bush, knew, because he was the head of the CIA 79 to 80.
He knew.
Right?
He knew.
Right? But past presidents since then, because they're only there for 4 to 8 years, they're only temporary visitors in the White House. So why
they're not security specialists like George H.W. Bush was. He was a security specialist before becoming president of the United States. And Ronald Reagan had government background technically. That's why he was such an effective president. I'm going to bring up my research in Washington, D.C. from 2012 to 2017, which is under the Obama administration. And the Obama administration said there was no ET cover-up or evidence of ET at all. Yet, 4 blocks from the White House, where my mansion was in Washington, D.C., I was getting UFOs on the trajectory of the White House, on the trajectory of the U.S. Capitol building on a nightly basis. And I have the videos to show that. So we see, based on the evidence, that the Obama administration lied their asses off associated to alien events occurring in and around the White House during the Obama administration's tenure in office. Because my research is during the Obama administration's tenure in office. And here I'm showing you this page of UFOs that are absolutely extraordinary, including one event which showed a blue object, which was consistent with the blue objects around the North Pole of Jupiter. You know, they had NASA documented that, and then they started distorting all of the evidence associated to those water plumes associated to the Jupiter moons and the planet itself.
Yes.
And here is this object that I documented clearly. It's in Washington, D.C. airspace. It had the exact same luminous quality. When you look at files, and we look at forensic data, for example, and we're talking about these blue objects that were around the polar regions of Jupiter. And here's this blue object on Earth, and it just so happens to have the exact consistency of the events documented around Jupiter. What conclusion can you draw from that, other than that those objects that they filmed, NASA's filmed coming from Jupiter itself and from the moons of Jupiter, are indeed alien spacecraft headed to Earth?
You know, it's
And I
ironic
have a sample of that.
you mentioned that, because I have my brother, my little brother, I'm the black sheep with regards to believing in UFOs and ETs, etc. And what I noticed was that he works for a private military contractor. He can't even tell me the name of the company or anything like that. But he did tell me.
No, they can't. It's all secure. It's all secure data. You don't want to know that. You can go on my LinkedIn page and find that out, though, because they're all on my LinkedIn page.
Well, one year when he came back from the Middle East, he told me that if I was willing to live out there and work for this, private military contractor, he can get me a job searching UFOs for $500,000. And I said, hold on a second, you don't even believe in them. So where did this come from? And what
They believe in them.
He does, yeah. And he said, what?
They've been lying. It's all been a lie. Believe me, all of this has been a lie. They're deeply associated with these events that are happening, and they want to know what's up. And they are trying to find out what's up. They're not trying to let you know that they're trying to find out, but they're in it.
What he told me that actually got him to be convinced was that one of the people that he was working with, actually on a separate job, it was a former Army general, 4-star general, who was working again for this PMC. And he said that he had the most sophisticated equipment paid for by Uncle Sam to search within our solar system for ET craft. And it was tracking patterns, sizes, shapes, etc. And the irony was, he said that every time they would spot them, say by Mars, they would focus all their equipment to track them. It's like they would read the minds of the people on Earth tracking them, and they would immediately go to the other side of the sky. And it just blew me away, and that's what it took to convince him.
Yeah, they know it's mind control associated to it. You know, what I'm telling you, when I said that when we did Uncovering Aliens and the extraterrestrial sent me a telepathic message to set up my camera and film them appear and disappear in Sedona airspace, this is what we're talking about. They want to disclose the fact that they're here, and I've documented the fact that they're here, and I'm documenting how they're getting here, because in my samples, clearly you see, as we spoke of earlier, these objects don't fly into the airspace, they're materializing into it. So we see that clearly. So that says they're using this means of transportation, quantum teleportation, which is large-scale transporting technology, a technology that could technically transport a planet from one solar system to another at large scale. We talk alien stuff, alien technology, nothing that humans can do at our current level of technology, obviously. But these extraterrestrial objects and these spacecraft that I'm documenting that are miles long, nightly, miles long, and this hyperstar lens that I'm using is designed specifically for Hubble applications. And I'm getting these objects with this Hubble camera. If he's got that technology and he says he's got the fact that he can document aliens, then why isn't he showing it? Here I'm showing you the stuff, and I'm showing you NASA footage with the same objects. I'm showing you footage taken by the Russian Space Agency with the same footage. But yet, the Americans have yet to put out the fact that they know these objects are here, and the only fact that I got that the Americans did document this object was with Grumman in 308, 1960.
Wow.
So we know it's here. We know the object is here.
1960,
they're not letting us know.
60 years ago. It'll be 2020 in a matter of months.
70 years ago. 70 years ago next year. 69 years ago. That same object and the photographs Grumman has using their limited 4x5 film technology, I've got the forensic evidence associated to it in Ultra HD 4K showing that same spacecraft in our airspace consistently as if it's part of the airspace itself.
Through all the years that you've captured all this, and I know we talked about the people that don't believe, and then you try to show them something, and they don't believe even after 1,849 files, right? Is there anyone that did not believe, saw what your evidence, and then started to believe and take this seriously?
I've got a few people that did that. But the ones who did not believe initially, and they found out that it was true and the material I was presenting was correct, developed deep-rooted psychological issues, became unstable, like incapable of handling the fact that something is here, and they didn't want to deal with that at all. It scared the shit out of them.
You know, and I think that's what a lot of it is. It really just scares the shit out of people because what they can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about it. You know, it took me a while because these damn little things, everywhere I went, my parents were military. My father was what's called OSI, which was the equivalent to U.S. military CIA. My mother was the same. And everywhere I went, on every base that I lived on, and I was raised on U.S. military bases all my life, on every base that I lived on, I had alien contact. There wasn't one base that the aliens did not show up.
Military base, right? They're always...
No, I'm talking United States Air Force bases. Wow. One of the bases in particular is Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, which is now closed. I had an encounter there. I can't even explain. It just made no sense at all. But here is documentation of everything that I've been experiencing since childhood. I have on film. And even then, that documentation is scrutinized by these mindless clusterfucks that claim to know everything, and they don't. They're bullshit artists. And they want things to be Star Wars, a Star Wars Millennium Falcon spaceship. And the spaceships I'm documenting is nothing like that at all. And it's just ironic that all the objects, and I'm using 5 different kinds of cameras, and each camera is documenting the same thing. And these idiots say, oh, it's a glitch in the camera?
5 of them, really?
Bullshit.
What's the probability of that?
All 5 of them have the same glitch. Yeah, what's the probability of that? But you think about it, it's all a way to diffuse things, to make things lighter than what they actually are. And the fact of the matter, this shit scares the shit out of people, and they're terrified. And the ones that talk about it, that claim to be experts, they're lying their asses off. If you're going to sit there and talk about Anunnaki or some kind of extraterrestrial race, that would mean you have to have first-hand knowledge associated to them, which we don't. And you're going to sit there and talk this crap like you're an expert? That's a bullshit artist. You have to think about everything most of these people are talking about. It's bullshit. And here, I'm not saying much of nothing, but I'm talking about the videos that I generate. Notice I didn't say where they come from. I know nothing. But I can show you these events, and I can show you the scientific associations associated to these events.
I respect that more than people who say they have all the answers.
But they don't. That's what I'm saying. And people believe these storytellers because I think everybody wants to believe deep down inside, and everybody has this romper room fucking mentality, and they want to sit there and listen to comfy chair stories and stuff like they watched on TV when they were kids. That's absolutely mindless. And if there was a purple dinosaur, they're all about to be eaten. because they're so stupid. They've been dumbed up. If a real purple dinosaur did come down to Earth, we would be totally fucked up.
Yeah, I
And
totally
we're talking
agree.
about Barney. That's just bizarre. We're talking about Barney, a kid's TV show. Barney, a purple dinosaur.
All comes down to fucking fear. That's what I've realized.
Exactly. It's fear factor all the way, dude. Fear factor. And they know once they have you in fear, fear is a disease. You know, it took me years to become acclimated to the aliens, even as a child. My parents had to beat me to go to bed because I would not go to bed at night at all. I knew them damn aliens were up there. I didn't want to see them little bastards. But every night they were with me. Every night they were with me. And nobody believed me. Every night they were with me. Every night. And look at my work now.
What year was this when you were 5 years old, if you don't mind me asking? This is pretty much your age.
1962.
Wow. Okay, so you've really had a lot.
Betty and Barney Hill data, which, by the way, Betty Hill took pictures that they say were splotches in development, and the pictures are consistent with the close encounter I had at the U.S. Capitol building in 2002. 100% consistent.
Now, I know it would be difficult, but because it's like choosing amongst your children when you have all this amazing evidence. What are the 3 best cases or crafts that you filmed? One, to me, is what you saw over D.C., that giant city-like, Tic Tac object with those 18, bombshells in the was it Whole Foods, you said?
Oh yeah, with the blondes. Yeah. That was one of them. But what's interesting, I got that craft 3 times. I got it 105 2017, 106 2016, and 5/14 2014 in the exact same airspace that I got it in 2017. So I got 3 documents spaced over a course of 3 years of this specific object in Washington, D.C. airspace. It's forensically documented.
There's a request from you, from Nicholas Cashmere, to share the experiences you had with the aliens. I know you saw a group of them and they implanted you, but I'm assuming since they implanted you and they've always come to see you as far as ships, have you seen the actual pilots, the occupants since then?
I on occasion will wake up not at home, and when I wake up, I can see myself lighted as if I have a spotlight on me, but I can't see the source of the spotlight anywhere. It's like I'm in a completely black void, but I can see myself clearly. Then I'll black out. I'll wake up again, and I'll be on what appears to be a metal-like table, and I could see up above me various kinds of aliens with large heads, small heads, little ones, big ones, looking down as if it was a medical procedure in a medical school when they do surgical procedures. They allow the students to see the procedure as it's being done. That's what I noticed. And then I would black out and wake up back at home.
Wow. You know what's crazy is I uncovered, a lot of the skeptics will say, oh, we got these aliens, the gray aliens, because of the 1950s movies, etc. That is such bullshit, and I'll tell you why.
It's bullshit. I saw them myself as a kid. It's bullshit.
You absolutely did, and I uncovered a British medical journal from 1895 that has a drawing of a table with 3 gray-headed, very skinny beings operating on someone.
Yes. It's exactly what, people think, oh, you got this information reading it somewhere. No, I didn't. When I was 5, I was into cartoons. I was into stuff like Rocky and Bullwinkle, and I didn't see no aliens. I didn't know anything about aliens. Had no idea aliens even existed. I didn't watch Lost in Space. I was a little kid. I didn't watch none of that crap. I didn't watch Outer Limits. I didn't see none of that. But the things I would describe to the people that when they asked me what did I experience, thought that I got it from the Outer Limits.
Wow. That blows me away. Now, does your family Do you have any siblings that have had any experiences
My
as
my
well?
family was involved on this close encounter in England. My mother and father and my brother. My brother would not wake up. I was screaming, but then I couldn't scream because nothing was coming out of my voice. And then my mother and father would have nightmares, consistent with the nightmares that I would have. So,
Wow.
everything that you think about people experience during these alien abductions, all of this shit is real. It's 100% real. Those of us that do have those experiences have the materials like I have to show you. How do I have what no space agency on Earth has? How do I have all of these files? Nobody on Earth has these files but me. How do I have them?
That's exactly because I think they have chosen you to be a
Exactly.
part of showing people the way and the truth. The truth.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's all I do. Notice I presented the data. I didn't say where they came from. I didn't say what their agenda is. I don't know. I don't know any of that. But I can show you these events. And I can show you what the events signify scientifically.
Now, we are coming to the last few minutes, Wilbur, and I wanted to ask you if you have a final statement that you'd like to give everyone, what would it be?
Be prepared for an extraterrestrial visitation. They're here. They're going to announce themselves really shortly. They're here.
I think so in our lifetime. Very well said. Amen. And plug in where people can find you. UFODC.com is your website, right?
UFODC.com, there are 30 chapters associated with UFODC.com. Each of those chapters has forensic evidence associated to that particular piece of information. All of it is scientifically authenticated. My associates are people like Dr. Bruce Maccabee, the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the late Dr. Neil Armstrong, and people who have scientifically been places that most humans have never been are my associates. Story Musgrave is one of them. He's an
Ah,
excellent astronaut. Story is one of my best friends, and he is confirmed through his missions as a shuttle commander some of the evidence that I presented to him, and he knows without a doubt that what I'm doing is definitely authentic. And people can see that work on UFODC.com, or they can Google Band of Light 308 1960 or Band of Light 2, which chapter is associated to my website, or the Nimitz Encounter, which is a chapter associated to my website, or they can go to my YouTube channel, which is Wilbur Allen at YouTube. And at any time, they can contact me at UFODC@AOL.com.
I'm glad you brought up Story Musgrave. I've had him on the show countless times, and it's ironic, Wilbur, that I just, spoke with him today about, picking a date for him when, he could fit. Because
Story is the man, brother. He is the man.
he really is. He really is. And
Yes, he is. You tell him I said that. You tell him I said that.
Oh, I absolutely will. I absolutely will. Well, with that being said, I want to give you a huge thank you, Wilbur. We have to do this again, and please.
Definitely. Just call me Dr. J. You and I are friends, brother. You can call me anytime.
I appreciate that. Hang by for a quick moment. I want to talk to you off air real quick. Let me just give some shout outs to all the people. First of all, Pam Vrettenberg, my social media manager. Check out our website, UnitedTruthSeekers.com. All my moderators, I want to thank you, and especially all the listeners, I really want to thank you. Those of you who are supporting via Super Chat, UFO Disclosure TV, thank you so much. Justin T, thank you. And Paper Crane Wishes, also thank you. The top three that we must try, I'm trying to have a see who can beat them, is Lars Saturn at $99.99 and Two-Headed Tasmanian at $79.99 and Alan A. Nakamura at $50. So with that being said, friends, remember the only thing you have to remember with regards to the show is the name of it. That is Dr. J Radio Live. Everything from Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, website, drjradiolive.com. You name it, it's DRJ Radio Live. And let me tell you one thing about Thursday. I'm not going to say who the guest is because I've constantly found out that each time I do, that they always end up appearing on Coast to Coast within days. So You'll find out Thursday. Unfortunately, it's not going to be at the regular time. It will be at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And all I could say is just pay attention to the website and social media to find out who it is. With that being said, friends, this is Dr. J along with Wilbur Allen, and we are officially signing off.